Hello and welcome to Cargo Shorts, brought to you by Old Dominion Freight Line. I'm your host, Jonathan Betts. It's the season of shopping and shipping when retailers face their peak period. This year appears to be shaping up like few others, though. Inflation remains a concern. Interest rates continue to rise. Retailers are worried about weakened spending. So where do things stand now? Do shippers expect this season to be naughty or nice? Joining me to discuss all of this is Dr. Tony Bell, Assistant Professor of Professional Practice at the Rutgers University Business School. He has more than 30 years of experience in supply chain operations and management with Johnson & Johnson, the Coca-Cola Company, Whirlpool, Maersk, and more. We are also joined by Steve Hartsell, Senior Vice President of Sales at Old Dominion Freight Line. Steve has been with OD for more than 20 years and has held multiple positions during his tenure, including Vice President of Sales, Director of OD Expedited, and as a Service Center Manager. Tony and Steve, great to have you with us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tony, let's start with you. Fall is the time of year when holiday shipping generally gives us a preview of what may be coming during the holiday shopping season. So what are you seeing right now, and what are your expectations this holiday season?
Sure, absolutely. So I will start by saying that I believe that consumers are going to be much more cost conscious this holiday season than previous seasons. I know I am personally. So we may see slightly softer sales than we have in the previous year. Now, so for retailers, trying to, I think, meet some of these customer and consumer expectations, they are still planning to offer some deep discounts this year. Now, why do we care from a supply chain perspective? Because this is exactly the type of information that helps us with demand shaping, right? So when we think of factors like point of sale data and looking at historical sales and looking at orders and being able to use that information to, drive our forecast, this is also some additional information that we need, some of this environmental external information that's just as important. So overall, that's kind of at least what I see in terms of this year. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, without question, consumers still facing a lot of headwinds this year. So what does this mean for holiday shipping, Steve? What are you guys seeing?
Well, if you go back to last year, if you remember, there was really no holiday surge. Products was tied up on container ship lines that never made it to port. And actually, Christmas items were being put on shelves in January and February. This year is better, but with inflation and rate hikes, folks just don't have the extra income, which is affecting the holiday shipping. We haven't seen a peak. It is better, but it's nowhere near what it was prior to COVID.
Really? So still some more work left to do.
Correct. Yeah. We're busy. We have some added business with the yellow freight going out of business, but it hadn't been what we see as a holiday surge.
Tony, Steve just mentioned some of those supply chain issues last year, the Christmas gifts on shelves in January. Have those supply chain challenges been solved yet? Are we still going to have this issue this coming holiday season?
I don't believe so. I don't believe to the degree that we have. I would say solved, no. In process of being solved, absolutely. So we're seeing a lot of retailers that are thinking about and starting to or continuing to right size their inventories to try to really get that right. But if you think about it, right now, post-pandemic, we're definitely in what I would call, and I hate to use this term, but I am going to again anyway, it's a new normal, right, in the supply chain. So we have an increasing number of risks as well, and they don't appear to be going away. And what are some of those, right? Continued labor shortages, weather patterns, so more weather events, whether it be tornadoes or hurricanes or wildfires, cyber criminality, which a lot of folks don't necessarily think of trying to keep, our data and especially our supply chain data as safe as possible. But this isn't all gloom and doom, right? So what are retailers and manufacturers doing more of than they have in the past? Well, definitely more of an investment in stronger supply chain planning capabilities, right? So being able to leverage a lot of technology that's out there, like, predictive analytics and AI, to be able to help with, some of their planning. And that kind of bleeds into, improved forecasting. making more robust their sales and operations planning and integrated business planning processes, right? Looking at control towers and being able to really be able to have greater visibility of your supply chain, a focus on supply chain risk mitigation strategies, right? So these are all different improvements that can be made by manufacturers and retailers, but also I think in the process of being made to be able to help alleviate some of these external factors that we're facing.
But Tony, when you list all of these uncertainties, these external factors, and it is a lot of doom and gloom, and it does
It's a lot.
every day.
It's a lot of stuff.
And every day seems to bring more doom and gloom. Do you feel like these manufacturers, these retailers are adjusting fast enough here in terms of managing their inventory and the supply chain operations?
I'll tell you, given what we have, I do. I really do. I see much more of a focus on, again, trying to make their supply chain planning processes just even that much more improved and that much more efficient, because that's really going to drive, I think, a lot of trying to get at some of these issues. I'll tell you, there's one organization that I used to work for that has a risk mitigation team in place. And that's all they do day to day. They literally look at supply chain risks, all types of risks, whether they be environmental risks or, risks mainly maybe with a supplier that might be getting out of the market or something like that. But that's all they do. And they try to figure out how can we mitigate these risks, on a day-to-day basis and provide that information to the appropriate functions that can help to make that change and make that better. So I definitely see, given all of these things, right, all of these factors that are impacting supply chains, I definitely see where manufacturers and retailers are, moving in that direction. And so, that just kind of gives you an idea of what these manufacturers and retailers are doing to try to address these problems.
It also gives you an idea of how quickly the technology around this is also changing.
Absolutely.
So, Steve, your thoughts on this? What kind of changes have you seen in inventory management?
Wow. So Tony had some really good insights on that. Maybe some of these retailers need to hire him to help with the supply chains. But, here at OD, we've seen folks do a much better job. We mentioned last year that retailers had a lot of inventory, but they just didn't have enough workers to process the freight that they had. We even had to place embargoes on some of our customers because they just couldn't take our equipment. But it's gotten a lot better. Other retailers just burned through their inventories, and now they need the just-in-time model, services that increase their sales and help avoid fines. They're not willing to hold on to the inventories because it just costs so much to do that. So, they have to keep a really close eye on it. They have to manage better and make sure that the orders are processed correctly.
So, Steve, how critical then is it for shippers to, fully evaluate their logistics plan in order to ensure they have a strategy that meets these uncertainties, including, the ever-shrinking deadlines?
Well, ultimately, I think the plan is to get their product on the shelves on time and full. So they would need to have a plan to include their logistics provider, make sure their provider has capacity, and we mentioned drivers, have enough drivers to deliver when expected. So yeah, they need to have a lot of collaboration and make sure that the carrier can perform.
Tony, I know you've mentioned in the past that what we're seeing right now are not necessarily supply chain problems, but economic problems, that the economy is still having an impact on supply chains, not the other way around. Explain that to us.
Sure, absolutely. So much of that really came out of the pandemic, right? So when we were in the pandemic, we heard so much about supply chains. In fact, I never heard more about supply chains on the news than I did during and right after the pandemic, right? But it seemed to me that supply chains were presented not necessarily in the most positive light. It was almost like not providing all of the context around what was driving or what was really driving a lot of these supply chain issues. And so I think it's just a matter of understanding that, hey, it's these economic drivers or these geopolitical drivers or these environmental drivers that are causing supply chain challenges. But not to say that manufacturers and retailers don't have their role, because they absolutely do, right? I mean, they have to react to this and they have to be proactive as well, probably more proactive than reactive if they can. Hence, having risk mitigation strategies in place, having better planning processes in place, having improved visibility in place around their supply chain. Because if you think about it, if we didn't have all these supply chain problems, then we wouldn't have all these opportunities still, in the supply chain space, and a need for resources to be able to fill a number of the gaps that we have also in this space.
Yeah, Steve, it feels like shippers now have got to work extremely closely with carriers to guarantee fulfillment expectations. So, what do you think companies should be doing to prepare for some of the changing needs we're seeing during the holiday season?
Well, like I said, this year I don't see a surge. So next year, in Q3 2024, I expect it to get back to some sort of normalcy like it was prior to the pandemic. What they need to do is collaborate and understand the carrier services to match their needs and make sure that they can perform like OD's guarantee. We have our guaranteed service, our guaranteed by noon, and then a special on demand. But in particular with retailers, we have our must arrive by date service. So where the shipments won't deliver early or they won't deliver late, they arrive what is known as on time in full.
And Tony, we've got to talk about labor shortages as well, because that does seem to be a lingering issue for a lot of carriers, a lot of companies overall. Give us an idea of how that's impacting the overall supply chain.
Yeah, so we're still definitely experiencing labor shortages. There's no question about that. In fact, I think I read somewhere that we have about 1.4 million fewer Americans working today compared to, say, February of 2020. So right at the time, I think, of the pandemic, or directly, right before. Definitely seeing a number of labor shortages, no question, across the board. And again, I think Steve can even speak to some of the driver shortages that we're still experiencing, but they're across the entire supply chain, right, and across really our entire workforce. So, I definitely think that we're going to continue seeing some of these shortages. I still wonder where everybody is going. I haven't, gotten a complete picture of where is everybody going if they are leaving the workforce. But it does appear to be, a mixture of, starting your own business or doing something that's more remote, or just something that's not necessarily, that tough on the body.
Yeah, and certainly huge changes in the labor market right now. And Steve, I know you guys must be seeing some of that pressure. So what kind of case studies can you offer us about what you're seeing this year?
Well, going back to what Tony was talking about as far as driver shortages, yeah, the industry has a shortage in drivers. I mean, that's pretty well known. But here at OD, what we're seeing, we have an in-house driving program to where we could take folks off the dock and we pay them to learn to drive a truck. And if we need them, we'll put them on routes. And if we don't, then we'll allow them to go back and work for the same pay on the docks. So it's a little unique and a little different here. But case studies, I'll go back many years ago. We had an opportunity to deliver 1,500 shipments to a pretty good size retailer throughout the country. It was very specific. Had to deliver. There's two shipping locations, and this product had to deliver through the front door on a liftgate trailer. We had to meet the manager. The manager had to inspect the product, and there was a key. It was a cabinet. It was a cigarette cabinet that held cigarettes behind a cashier. And the manager had to get the key and open the lock and make sure that the cabinet worked. And that led us to what we have now as our must arrive by service, because we knew if we could manually handle 1,500 shipments and had zero issues, that we should start a service for big box retailers, not necessarily to deliver cabinets, but put product in stores or put product in the DCs so it could get to the stores, like I said, on time in full. And we call it service MABD. That was the genesis of that service. It also led us to form this tool called the chargeback portal. You can deliver on time and do everything right, but if the paperwork doesn't match up, then the shippers could still get fines from the retailer. So we developed this chargeback portal to help with that. So any part of the paperwork that we touch as far as making deliveries and setting up times to deliver, we keep that in that portal, and the shippers can use that.
And I think, Steve, this also plays into a larger narrative with OD about just overall prioritizing service. And why is that a priority for you guys, considering a lot of the other factors out there we've been discussing?
Well, that's really the only thing that we have to provide is our good service and customer service. Most people think that Okay, you can pick a shipment up on a truck and you take it and you deliver it, and that's really the end of it. But there's so much more to it. You have to get the invoicing right and the billing right, and if you speak to the customer, they want a good quality call, and we're just an extension of that shipper to their customer. So it's very important for us to maintain our service and deliver on time.
And I know the services are going to be busy, always busy, but especially in the coming weeks and months as we approach this holiday season. So, Tony, bottom line it for us here. What do you think shoppers can expect this holiday season? Are they going to find what they want on store shelves?
That's a great question. I think they will find what they want on store shelves, but I will say that consumers should think about if there is that very specific item that they're looking for, maybe like a special toy. And I mentioned this even last year, they should try to get to that right away. Because if you think about it, a lot of these retailers now are pushing a lot of these sales and a lot of these discounts further up. So the earlier, the better in terms of purchasing, if there's that specific thing that you're looking for, but maybe your standard everyday items, yes, I don't think you'll necessarily have a problem with those. Now, some things like I think your like phones or tablets and computers, I'm hearing that we're still having some challenges around chips and semiconductors, but we might want to think about at least those items where there might be a little bit of a shortage.
So not completely out of the woods, but certainly a lot better than last year, it sounds like.
Proceed with caution.
The new normal.
Yep. The new normal.
All right, Tony, Steve, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it here. Well, certainly customer expectations are growing, even as economic stress factors remain. With an uncertain holiday season ahead, consistent and reliable service is more essential than ever to ensure our gifts make it under the tree in time. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our full Cargo Shorts podcast series. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, and Google Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, share with your colleagues, or drop us an email at marketing@odfl.com. You can also visit the OD Outlook section of the Old Dominion Freight Line website at odfl.com, where you can find additional information and materials on this topic. Thanks for listening.